Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Phil Easton, and I'm the Director of the American Center for Military and Veterans Affairs. It is my pleasure to welcome you today to today's online webinar, A Soldier Citizen Recipient's Perspective, Value of Military Members to the Financial Services Industry. As we wait for folks to sign on, we have a few announcements to share. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, please enter them into the question and answer function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If time allows, we will have a question and answer session toward the end of the webinar and try to answer as many questions as we can. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Jim Roy, our Executive Director of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs.
Hey, thank you, Phil. And let me first start by welcoming each of our attendees and introducing our special guest with us today, General Lester Lyles, who served our nation for over 35 years. He retired as the commander of the Air Force Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. He also dedicated 15 years to serving on USAA's Board of Directors from 2004 to 2019, serving as the chairperson for nearly 7 years, and was the college's 2022 Soldier Citizen Award recipient. General Lyles, thank you for joining us here today. We really appreciate your time today.
Jim, thank you very much. It's my honor, and Happy New Year to you.
As I will say for all of our attendees today, Happy New Year's, if I've not said that. Thank you for your service, General Lyles. We just opened up the nomination window for the 2023 Soldier Citizen Award. I wanted to begin today by asking, what does it mean to you to be the 2022 Soldier Citizen Award recipient?
Well, Jim, I can honestly say that it was really one of the highlights of my my career of service, if you will, to our country. You would think 35 years in the Air Force and even serving 15 years on the board of USAA would have satisfied a lot, and it certainly did. But there's such great esteem associated with the American College of Financial Services and such great professionalism and great credibility associated with the organization. And when I received the award in 2022, the Soldier Citizen Award, I was, in all honesty, blown away. And one of the things that really got to me is the opportunity to learn more. You can never learn enough or stop learning. I obviously knew of the American College of Financial Services because of my roles at USAA, but I'll dare say I did not know the full scope of everything that they do. So when I received first the nomination and then was honored and humbled to receive the award, it was really very, very gratifying. And as I look back on previous recipients, it's even more gratifying. It's fantastic.
And we're certainly glad you joined those ranks, sir, and proud to have you on board. And we appreciate spending some time with you and up in Philly this past year to celebrate that opportunity. You know, your experience as you look back at, as I look back at your resume, your bio, if you will, is so wide and varied. And as you expressed with us up in Philly, there's a lot more to it than just written on paper. But if I could just kind of narrow down on your military leadership experience and how that has helped you in your civilian career.
Well, Jimmy, I think that is a characteristic and quality of military veterans or service men and women in every capacity. It's leadership and the ability to serve and lead large organizations and lead people. And that's something that I found when I made the transition to the civilian sector. I found that's not either understood or appreciated or exhibited as much in professionals as you might think. I'm amazed throughout my post military career time period, amazed at how many CEOs, as an example, that I get a chance to work with or have worked with, who are probably great technicians in their particular fields, whatever it might be, but they turn out to be lousy leaders. That's probably not fair to say about all of them, for sure, but it's amazing how much we probably take for granted. Those of us who've served in uniform, take for granted the embedded leadership opportunities we have and how that can carry over to service in so many different ways. And so I really learned a lot about that, but also really appreciate even more the opportunity to serve people and now to apply those skills to the civilian sector where it is really greatly needed.
And what I've always found is that it's not just the education that we are offered in the military, but also that experience, that leadership experience that we have from being a young lieutenant, right? So all the way through to being a 4-star. So thank you for that.
And if I could add, Jim, if you don't mind,
yeah,
you're right in my perspective, from a young lieutenant to being a 4-star. But I dare say that applies to all of us who wore the uniform, from a young tech sergeant or staff sergeant to being the senior master sergeant of the Air Force. It's amazing how much leadership experience and opportunities that you mentioned that you get in there, and then how greatly it needs to be applied in the rest of the civilian world.
That's right, exactly. So, General, your time on the board of directors in USAA and serving as the chairperson, I knew you had tremendous impact on helping both the military members, the veterans, and their spouses in transition to employment into USAA. Could you expand on your role and work with USAA and your firsthand experience? What you saw with them doing that within their transition, and what kind of pieces was kind of the jewel, if you will?
Well, Jim, some people may think, if you look at USAA, our role at USAA is to serve military members and their families. You would think it would be a no-brainer, if you will, that we would employ and really embrace veterans, and we did. But it wasn't as conscious an effort as all of us on the board, and certainly I, as both when I was the vice chairman and the chairman, realized we needed to do more and have a conscious effort. So we really, not just with me as the chair, but our CEOs, former CEOs like Joe Robles, retired Army 2-star, really embraced that, and we decided that we needed to have some specific goals. So we actually established a mandate that we would, as we looked at new employees to bring into USAA, to bring onto our management team and to the workforce, that we had a goal of at least 30% of them, at least 30% would be from veterans and military spouses. And so we actually achieved those goals. And they weren't just a ceiling. That was not the number. We wanted to look and make sure that every time we had an opportunity to fill a position or to bring somebody in, that we look specifically for veterans or we look for military spouses. And that conscious effort really, really was successful and made sure everybody appreciated it. And probably for me, at least one highlight was a few years ago, several years ago, I guess I should say now, during the Obama administration, you may recall that the First Lady, Michelle Obama, and the Second Lady, the Vice President's wife, now our current First Lady, Jill Biden, constantly made an effort of supporting military members and military spouses and veterans. And I'll never forget the opportunity to represent USAA at a White House ceremony where the two of them, Michelle Obama and Jill Biden, honored a small group of companies, corporate Fortune 500 companies and USAA, to thank them for their support to veterans and military spouses. And we're just a handful of companies, along with USAA, who were invited to this big ceremony at the White House. And I had the opportunity to represent USAA at that. So it shows we were doing something right, but it was also recognized by the senior leadership.
So it's really about institutionalizing the effort, I guess you would say.
Great word, and that's probably the most appropriate terminology. And I'll just say this, I've been involved with companies and still involved with companies who have a flurry of activities. It's the flavor of the year, if you will, to support veterans or to hire military spouses. But when a few years go by or the leadership changes, it's amazing how quickly some of those initiatives fall off the wagon, if you will. If you institutionalize it and make it part of your normal routine and normal culture, it's amazing what you can do to continue to support those two very important entities.
You should be proud, sir, because they have reached out to us, and we at the college, and we've been working with them on some plans, I will say. So farther as far as continuing that institutionalization of that thought, because they really are interested in military. As you said, there's a lot of companies out there that have a flurry of activities, but there are others out there that institutionalize those things. So.
Yeah. And Jim, if you don't mind me mentioning along those lines, another example that I really just really impressed me and floored me, because it was an initiative started by then one of our top managers at USAA, who happens to be now the CEO, Wayne Peacock, when he was working not just at USAA, but also working and supporting activities in the city. He and the city leadership made it a point that they were going to work together to get every veteran, homeless veteran, on the streets in San Antonio off of the streets. USAA put money in, several $1 million into that effort. The city obviously supported the effort, and they came up with a game plan to work with and actually identify veterans who were homeless on the streets of San Antonio. Now, I'll tell you, it surprised me, not every homeless person wanted to get off the streets. Some of them got accustomed to that. But for those who wanted to get off the streets and wanted to find vast work or other opportunities and a place to live, between USAA and the San Antonio leadership, they were successful in doing that. And I've actually touted that example to other communities around the country. If you're worried about homelessness and you're worried about veterans who may be homeless, talk to the people at USAA and in San Antonio to see what they did, because it worked and it was very successful.
That's awesome. That's great. And as you know, that happens other places as well. And hopefully they have reached out to companies like USAA. Online today, we have a lot of different companies in the financial services, and they're all looking for bringing military and military members or military spouses and veterans on as well. And what you just alluded to with USAA, I think is an example of that. And I'm sure many of them can share those same type of examples. Sir, I think go back to maybe a little bit closer home with you. As I know our listeners would appreciate it. Some of the opportunities and maybe challenges that you personally experienced in your transition. I know that transition happened a couple of years ago, but if you could talk a little bit about that, what are some of the opportunities and experiences you had?
Well, I dare say, and Jim, I probably could ask you that same question and ask from your experiences. I will tell you, when I retired, and it was almost exactly 20 years ago, 2003, when I retired, I was very afraid that my phone would never ring. Nobody would ever call to ask me to get involved in anything, if you will. But I was quickly surprised and pleased that the phone sort of rang off the hook in some respects, and still does. So I think in terms of transition, the one thing that I would give to people who either just retired or who are about to retire and are looking to transition is don't worry. Your reputation, just being a vet, will actually precede you, and people will come and look for you in some form or another to help serve your community, serve companies, or to serve in some capacity, because they recognize that there's a jewel there that you can't waste to take advantage of that. So for me, that was the number one lesson that I learned as far as the transition. And then I for me, because I was in command of Air Force Material Command, and I had been involved in research and development in science and technology and logistics most or all of my 35 plus years in the Air Force, I was used to working with large companies. Yes, I did have a flight suit and I wore it for on occasion for things, particularly if I had an opportunity to fly in an Air Force plane. And I'm not talking about just transports, to fly backseat in F-16 or fly the right seat in a B-2, et cetera. I proudly wore that that flight suit. But for the most part, the meetings that I went to in terms of business, if you will, I dealt with people in civilian clothes. And so it was not a foreign thing to me to be involved with companies and organizations who dressed like that. And I found that I fit in very well. So my transition, because of my background, was probably a little bit easier than, say, somebody coming out of the cockpit or coming off the flight line and then going to a company. I still say that they should not worry, that people will recognize what they have contributed to our country, and people will call because we need that kind of service in the civilian sector just as much as we need it in our national security sector.
Yeah, that's excellent, sir. And right along that same vein, you know, there's just a vast array of opportunities, or should I say, educational and career opportunities out there, kind of services available out there. How would you advise somebody looking to get into the financial services industry, a military member or military spouse, to make that transition? How do you decipher? How do you go through all that and kind of pick out what's of real value to people?
Well, Jim, the first advice I would give somebody is part of the word that you used earlier, education. Don't assume that you know everything there is to know about financial services communities or the financial service complete realm of organizations. So in some respects, it takes a little bit of digging, a little bit of study to find out what's out there. Some people probably are not familiar, in all honesty, with the American College of Financial Services. And just Googling or going to your website and finding out about the vast array of courses and opportunities there would just open up the aperture relative to things that a person might get involved in. And so an individual has to do a little bit of studying on his or her own, just to look and see what might be there if they're interested, particularly in the financial sector. And then talk to somebody, ask somebody about that. Don't assume again that you know all there is to know about the opportunities out there. Gracious for somebody in the everyday life. If you're interested in financial services, ask at your bank that you use, or ask online about what the opportunities might be. And it will just, again, blow your mind in terms of what's out there. And then that leads to an opportunity to search for, where do I get better educated for those things, like the American College of Financial Services. So if there's a little bit of give and take, the give is to study a little bit and find out what's out there, because the possibilities and the opportunities are there.
Sir, I appreciate you bringing up the importance of education. And if I could maybe drill down on it just a little bit, maybe from a personal view of yours, can you give us a little insight to General Lyles on how education has played a role in your life and career?
Well, education to me is sort of all important. Growing up in Washington, D.C., and for you Eagles and Cowboy fans out there, forgive the fact that my birth certificate says I'm a diehard Redskins / Commanders fan. But growing up in Washington, D.C. in the inner city, I made a choice early on in terms of education. I had an opportunity to an appointment to the United States Air Force Academy, and I turned it down, decided to go to Howard University, the historical Black college in Washington, D.C., and majored in engineering. That was my career field. But I was part of Air Force ROTC. And so that in itself, particularly since I was an Air Force ROTC scholarship winner, meant that I was going to spend at least 4 years in the Air Force. And I thought that that was going to be it. I spent 4 years in the Air Force as an engineer, and I had to get out and actually further my engineering education with finishing my PhD in engineering. And the Air Force had other things in mind. That 4 years ended up being 35 years. And throughout every year, I never stopped learning and getting educated in some form or another. It could be professional military courses. It could be academic courses to stay abreast of the engineering field. It could be courses to stay abreast of things like the financial community, which we all really need in order to be successful in supporting our families and our dreams and visions for the future. So education to me is number one, and I recommend never stop learning to everybody. I don't care how old you are or where you are in your career field, never stop learning. There's always something you could learn and to take advantage of.
That's definitely sage advice for sure. And we appreciate you telling us a little bit of insight to General Lyles. If I could ask you, when you look at a military member, military spouse, veteran, what do you think those qualities are that they possess, that they've garnered through their experience with the military that make them an ideal candidate for financial services?
Well, Jim, the number one quality that I sort of touched on before is leadership and leadership experience. As I said earlier, it's surprising how many people in, I don't care whatever career field you might be, but I'll say the financial services area, and I've dealt with those besides obviously the military organizations, banks, et cetera. It's amazing how many of them, when tested in terms of leadership, don't quite know how to handle the things or what to do. It's it becomes second nature to military people and military spouses because they're the ones supporting their spouse in so many different areas of his or her career. It's amazing how few of them have really experienced or had their leadership tested. And what military veterans and spouses of military people bring is that innate knowledge and experience that they've had in demonstrating their leadership capabilities, solving problems. It may be individual problems, maybe organizational problems, but it's sort of innate in terms of leadership. The USAA recognized that up front, which is one of the reasons why we put such a premium on trying to bring veterans and military spouses into the workforce there at USAA. And we recognize that there is a translation or transition, if you will, that we did. So we, as an example, we created a course sort of like Battlefield, the boardroom that some other organizations have. We created a course that battlefields to being a server or person who can handle all the things that are involved in insurance and in banking. And we had that course for any veteran that we bring into USAA. We made it mandatory that they had to go through those kind of courses to make sure they understood what they were going to get into and even understood the language difference. And I was very happy as the chairman to go and speak to each one of those courses, particularly the graduation ceremony, to welcome those individuals, those experienced veterans and spouses into the family there at USAA. So it made it very, very great to have that kind of capability as part of our workforce.
That's it's so neat and interesting that you talk about the value of the member to the company, because that's important. Because as a military member, what I always found is, I can do a lot of things. The mission is always driving me to something, but I got to feel relevant to the mission of the company that I work for. And I think that's something that, I don't know if you want to expand on that anymore, but, if you can make them feel relevant to the mission at hand, that means an awful lot to the military members and the spouses.
Yeah, you're right, Jim. And of course, for USAA, it was sort of a natural, if you will, because our job and role is to serve military members and their families. And then when you bring in a military member as part of the workforce and part of the management team, he or she automatically connect to the mission. And it was really it just blossomed, if you will, for them and for USAA to have people who are members of the USAA, but who are now serving USAA to make sure that mission is as best or as good as it could be.
Yeah, that's excellent. If I could go back to kind of that transition point, what would you or how would you advise somebody, a military member or spouse? How do you advise them to communicate their value? Because a lot of times what I always saw was we don't like to talk about ourselves very often, right? We're taught to be humble, be focused on the mission. Any advice for somebody doing that transition, military member, military spouse?
Well, the first thing, of course, is when a military member or spouse has an opportunity to come into any organization, any company, if you will, whether it's a part of the financial services community or any other job, they probably go through some sort of job interview. That's the number one opportunity to tout what they've actually done and to raise in what they experienced while they were either in uniform or supporting as a spouse the person in uniform, because most people don't know. And until somebody sits down and talks to them about it and tells them that, it's amazing how little they understand about what military members actually do. As a matter of fact, one of the things I advise when I'm talking to military members who are still not even near retirement, who are still in the service, still wearing a uniform, one of the things I always ask is, have you talked to your parents or your community that you grew up in? Have you talked to them about what you do? Have you invited them to your base so they can see what you do and what your fellow members in uniform do? And usually the answer is no. And so it's no wonder to me that the general population doesn't really know or understand all the great things that military members do. Because like you said, we don't even, not only do we not talk about it, we don't even take advantage of the opportunity to bring in our family, bring in our friends, and just let them see what really goes on at a base or what you really do. It will blow their minds when they see that, but more importantly, when they see the tremendous breadth of responsibility that the United States Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Space Force, Coast Guard, see what responsibilities we give to young men and women and how much they have learned and are learning and doing in their different missions and capacities. So we do need to talk about it, but we can start talking about it even earlier than at the retirement stage. I'm proud of what people are doing in uniform, and I wish we talked even more about it than what we do.
Yeah, that's so valuable because a lot of times we think that we have to serve up into that last day, and there's a transition period there that we need to make sure that people are preparing themselves for as well. So
Yes.
I always tell people that you've got to take care of yourself at that point as well. So I don't know, any other thoughts?
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Jim. Take care of yourself, and it doesn't have to be in a very selfish, self-serving mode. Just talking about it, sharing the kind of things you're involved in, whether you realize it or not, you're taking care of yourself and taking care of your family and taking care of others who are in uniform. Because as I said, most people don't really understand that. One of the things that's a little bit of a chagrin today, well, back in my day, maybe in your day too, you could look at the United States Congress, congressmen and women and senators, and a large proportion of them either have served or are families of those who are served in uniform. So they really understand it. Today, because of lots of reasons, but because of the volunteer military, et cetera, today, very few members of Congress or senators have that same purview where they have served in uniform or are part of a family that have served in uniform. And so even they don't fully understand as much as they probably should about what military members are, what we do, in the value that we present to any organization. So it's up to us to share that, to talk to people about it.
And looking at from the other side, if you will, if you were somebody doing the hiring, what kind of questions would you ask a military member or military spouse that might prompt them to kind of open up a little bit and tell us a little bit more about you? Is there any ideas, any thoughts to that, anything you think that might be useful to a hiring authority?
Yes, yes, Jim, and it really relates to what I mentioned before. One of the first questions I do ask people who I know are either veterans or coming out of the military or are spouses of veterans or even the kids of veterans, if you will, I tell them that now, of course, I'm as a military member myself, it's sort of perhaps obvious that I would be interested, but I would suggest that any company should just open the door and tell people, I really want to understand what you did. Please tell me the kinds of things that you had a chance to do while you were in uniform or while your spouse was in uniform, and invite them to open up. And it'll be very obvious that we're interested, and it's not surprising, they will open up about the things they had a chance to get involved in.
Yeah, that's excellent. And expand that just a little bit further with how the college can help with that as well, right? So a couple of initiatives that we have ongoing is this idea of career services and how we want to expand. We've got Amanda Raymond on as our director of career services now. Any vectors of what direction you think we should take that as far as helping a military member and spouse?
Well, I think one of the things you do very, very well at the American College of Financial Services is that you stay attuned to the issues and challenges that military members and their spouses have. So you know probably better than say XYZ corporation, even if it's a Fortune 500 one, you know what their challenges are. You know what the things are that worry them, and so you can appeal to them in terms of marketing HCFS, but also in terms of making sure you know what kind of courses that you need to offer. It's staying abreast of things is probably the number one both value, but also I would ask you to continue at HCFS to make sure you really know what it's like to be in their shoes today.
Yeah, that's good. And obviously the college sees that relevant because they've got incentive for military and veterans affairs, right? Some schools don't, a lot do. But one of the things that our CEO, George Nichols, has really kind of placed an emphasis on is the military. And that encompasses both those in uniform, those that are veterans and spouses. And we're continuing to expand with GI Bill to our different designations and such. So do you see that as where do you see that expanding? Do you think that the military using GI Bill is something that we should continue to expand out to? Because right now we only have it for our master's programs. Any thought to that?
Yeah, Jim, I think as we well know, when I say we, I mean you and I and those of us who have been around a little bit and even have retired, the GI Bill is a golden opportunity for our military members and for their spouses and for their families. And I, again, have been surprised when I've gone out and talked to people who, even those who are in uniform to some extent, and talking particularly to their kids, they really don't know what the GI Bill is. They think that's something from World War II and that it's either elapsed or it's no longer valuable. We need to continue to tout that and talk about its value, not just to the members but who take advantage of it and what can take advantage of it, but also to those on the Hill in Congress who are the ones who sort of ratify and make sure that it stays relevant, if you will, for the future. So it's It's one of those relics, some people think, from the past that's still very, very valuable and will continue to be if people take advantage of it and utilize it.
Yeah, that's good advice, sir, and we'll keep advocating for that. So, sir, you've just been appointed as chair of the DoD's newly formed Defense Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion back in September of last year. So it's fairly new. Are there any upcoming initiatives that maybe you want to share with military members, veterans, spouses here today?
Not to the extent that I would like to,
Sure.
Jim. So I'm going to put a marker down, if you will, and
Yeah.
ask if you or somebody could ask me back, say a year from now, to talk specifically about it's called DACO-DI, Defense Advisory Committee on Diversity and Inclusion. Some of our members out there may be familiar with DACO-WITS, the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Services. They may not know that DACO-WITS has been around for 70 years, 72 years. It started back in 1951, 52, if you will. And it's still very relevant to look at how women are being treated in the services. DACO-DI, this new advisory committee, is to advise the Secretary of Defense, all the service secretaries and the service leaders, chiefs, if you will, about how they are doing, or the department in general is doing, to make sure diversity and inclusion and equity are being carried on positively and very well in every sector of the United States military. We just got established. We actually just formally got started with our first meeting about a month ago, and we'll have our next meeting coming up in a couple of months, and our first public meeting, second public meeting that we will do in the May timeframe. So we're just forming ourselves, just trying to determine exactly what we're going to focus on. I'm glad that we have people like the former head of the military in Japan, General Vince Brooks, is one of our 20 people who've been appointed by the Secretary of Defense to serve on this committee. And we are just getting started. So more to come on this. And I will be sure to keep you and others at ACFS apprised at how we're doing. But I will invite the public, because we have been designated an organization that's governed by the Federal Advisory Committee Act. So every meeting that we have, every meeting where we have deliberations, every meeting where we will be making decisions or talking about decisions is available to the public to listen in and understand what's going on, and even send in queries or questions to it. And so we will keep you apprised of what's going on there. We're still in our infancy, but more to come.
And I would encourage all of our audience, if you don't know what DACO-WITS was, to go Google that, and you'll see, you can kind of see how it has framed where we are today, way back when, and especially, with women in the military, and how it has been such an important organization. I've worked with many people that have been a part of that organization, and how that organization has really set forth the efforts and how women serve in the military.
It really has, and I'm very happy that Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has, as one of the 20 appointees for that, he appointed a retired Marine Lieutenant General Fran Wilson, who used to chair DACO-WITS at one point, is part of this new DACO-DI. So we will take advantage of lessons learned from DACO-WITS, having her on part of our particular activities.
Well, that's great, sir. And we wish you the best with that. I know you'll do exceptionally well, and we're proud to you're part of this as well. And being the chair of that. So, sir, that's all the official things that we had for you. But there's a couple questions that have come in for the field I'd like to maybe hit on, if you will.
Okay, Jim, if you don't mind, let me just add one other comment about
Yes,
the DACO-DI, and then we'll get to the public's questions. One of the reasons why General Austin, the Secretary of Defense, asked me to chair this group is because of an opportunity that I had 12 years ago to serve as the chairman of a congressional commission established to look at military leadership diversity. It was actually called the Military Leadership Diversity Commission. There were 30 of us commissioners who were part of that activity from all the services, active duty, Guard, Reserve, retirees, et cetera. And I was asked to chair that entity. We came up out of there with 20 recommendations to the then Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, and then to the leadership of all the services and to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When the year of racial reckoning, if I can use that term, occurred a couple of years ago, and the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, decided we need to go back and see what we're doing in the area of diversity, to see where we have fallen off the wagon, if you will, or not done everything. One of the first things they did was to go back to the 20 recommendations that came out of the Military Leadership Diversity Commission. And what they found is that half of them, nobody did anything with them. There was no action to them. And so that's one of the first things that the DACO-DI is doing, is looking at those recommendations. And I, because of my previous capacity, I think that was one of the reasons why I was selected to chair this entity.
Well, that's awesome, sir. Hopefully this time around we'll get all 20 of them completed and add 20 more to it. So
yes.
Sir, a couple questions. I want to go back to the USAA employment piece. There was a question that came from the field about does USAA employ or partner with comprehensive financial planners, and how would one participate, or how would you find out about those or participate in those? It's been a little while, I realize, since you were the chair, but do you know any of how they partner with planners?
The answer to that question is absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that we tried to do better at USAA, but I dare say, just because of that question, that we're probably not doing as well as we should, is to make our members aware of the financial planning capabilities and opportunities they have at USAA. I have a financial planner from USAA that I utilize. Every member can take advantage of the financial planning services, if you will, at USAA. And our previous CEO, who he's no longer the CEO, was a financial planner earlier in his career. That's one of the reasons why he ensured, Stuart Parker, he ensured that our financial planning capabilities were robust. And we tried to do a better job of making sure the members were aware of that. And because we now have partnerships with other organizations, other financial services organizations, and even in some cases, other banks where we partner with for different activities, we have a very excellent financial planning capability, and any member can go to the USAA website and look for financial planning opportunities and capabilities, and they will find a reference to how you can go to that particular part of our USAA's activities and find out how you too can take advantage of USAA's financial planning capabilities.
That's great, sir. I appreciate that. A couple other questions to go back to kind of General Lyles. So one of the questions came in about lessons from life. What if you look back, what would you say would be your top life lesson from the journey that you've had up to this day?
Oh, great. Wow. Great question. Well, I'm so old, there are probably lots of life lessons that I could quote, but I'll mention one of them that's relevant to a couple of things that we touched upon. And that is the value of service and serving people, both in terms of leadership experience that we've talked about earlier, but also how to be a good leader. I talk in speeches sometimes about an anecdote that I heard from an old Southern minister who was asked. He was very, very popular. He led a great organization in his ministry in the South. And he was asked one day by one of his parishioners, if you will, how do you get to be a good leader? How do you get to be a leader like you, with all the people that you who work for you, if you will, and all the people that you're leading? And that minister's immediate answer was, to be a good leader, first you have to learn how to serve and serve others. And if you learn what it is to serve and serve others in whatever it is you're doing, you are a major step towards, you've encompassed a major step towards being a good leader. And I found that to be true. If you are a good servant and you learn how to serve others in your organization, whether it's USAA or the broader military background, you have gone a long way towards being a good leader. First, you have to learn what it means to serve and how to serve others. And that's probably one of the number one lessons that I've learned. If you are serving others and you understand what it means to serve others, and you are doing a great job about serving others, you are a long way towards being a great leader.
Again, it's sage advice, and obviously something we're taught in the military, right? To you've got to be able to serve in order to serve.
Yes.
So it's important. Sir, I want to take you back a little ways to, if you were 21 years old today, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give Lester Lyles today?
Well, that question was asked of me recently during another forum I was doing, and I thought about that for a while and thought about it afterwards, if you will. Probably for me, for Lester Lyles, probably the number one advice that I didn't quite appreciate at the age of 21, when I came out of college, was out of Howard University, was how good my education was. Because I was part of Air Force ROTC, my first assignment by the Air Force was directly to graduate school. And I actually went to where the Air Force wanted to send me, New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I walked into New Mexico State University with others, military people, Air Force people, who were assigned to graduate program there at New Mexico State. And I doubted whether I was good enough to be there because I wasn't quite sure of the education at my historical Black college, Howard University, that I went to. And I quickly learned that my education was as good as, if not better, than those who came to New Mexico State under the auspices of the Air Force Institute of Technology, who came from major universities or larger universities. I quickly found that my education was as good as any others. I didn't know that going in because I had doubts about, literally, in all honesty, about the education at a historical Black college. I quickly learned that wasn't the case, and I was just as good as anybody else. Now, had I known that, or somehow had gained that knowledge ahead of time, probably it would have just made life easier for me going in when I was doing my graduate engineering work there. But I quickly learned that, and that was probably something I wish I had known when I walked into the door or the doors there at New Mexico State University.
Yeah, that's quite a story. That is quite a story. So, sir, unfortunately, we're getting close to that time, and I want to give you ample opportunity to kind of close any loops that you may have, any final thoughts that you may have, and we certainly appreciate your time today.
Well, two things, Jim, and I touched on one of them earlier, and that is for anyone in uniform, if you will, or anybody who's actually just coming out of uniform and are making their transition, tell your story. Don't be afraid to tell your story. I get not chastised, but I keep getting advice from people all the time who have transitioned that I should write a book about my experiences. Well, I dare say I could say that about Jim Roy. I could say that about many others out there. Tell your story. It is a unique story. And because of your experiences you've had in the military, your story is unlike any other, and it is extremely valuable. So tell your story to people so that they really understand the value that the military has had and the value of the things that you had a chance to do have to what it is you want to do or what it is you're involved in. And then when you get involved in whatever that might be, do what Jim Roy is doing right now. Pay it forward. Pay it forward and let other people know about what opportunities you have and what kind of things they can do as a result of your kind of experiences, as a result of the American College of Financial Services, and as a result of all the things that you have been so blessed, like I have, to be a part of in our United States military or serving our nation.
Yes, that's great advice, sir. And I would just add one small caveat to that. We always talk about the military. When we talk about the military, we talk about the member and their spouse. And if we've got any spouse on there today, that goes for you as well. You know, the spouses are so important to mission success, as we always say. And we believe that in the center. We believe that as a college. And sir, I won't speak for you, but I know you've noted it many times. So
yes, I told that story during my retirement ceremony at the Air Force Museum in 2003. And when I tell anybody about my spouse, my wife, Mina, I tell people that she's not just the wind beneath my wing or my family. She is sometimes the wing itself, the engines, the fuselage, the pilot. I wouldn't be anywhere without my spouse supporting me in so many different areas. And I believe in that. I know you believe in that. And we're all blessed by the things that we are able to do because of our spouses.
That's right. Thank you, sir. Thank
Jim,
you
if I could do one quick thing, if I could, I'm going to just move over for a second behind me. If anybody's looking at, they'll see a sword encased, if you will, and these plaques that I have, which were given to me by the senior military of the United States Air Force, and it inducted me into the Order of the Sword, which is a recognition from the senior enlisted personnel of the Air Force for my service to the Air Force, but also to everybody who's part of the Air Force, not just the officers, not just the civilians, but particularly the enlisted force who are the backbone of the United States Air Force, just like they are every other military service. And I proudly have that on the wall in my home. And I love having that as my backdrop anytime I get a chance to talk on the net about anything that I'm involved in.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. And again, thank you for your thoughts, your comments today. We really appreciate your sage advice. And also I want to say to all of our attendees out there today, thank you for joining us today. We're certainly appreciative of each of you. We thank you for continuing to support us so that we can support you. And so thank you all.
Great. Jim, thank you. God bless you, all of you. Thank you.
And on behalf of the American College Center for Military and Veterans Affairs, thank you all again for attending today's presentation. Thank you and have a wonderful day.